Hello, BookTube. Well, it's a bleak and barren Sunday. There are no books in the mail for Steve. And not only is it a bleak and barren Sunday, but it's bitterly early on a bleak and barren Sunday. Still dark outside, the barest hint of pink on the horizon. Street lights blinking instead of changing. No traffic, no people, not even animals. A certain someone insisted that she had to get up and go outside, and so we did. And now she's having trouble settling down. She's having trouble getting comfortable to go back to sleep. So I imagine that in very little time she's going to have to go out again, and so there's no real point in relaxing. I'll just wait. It'll be a rough morning. So it's bad all around, because even when the sun comes up, there aren't going to be any books. But I thought, I can do what I always do. I can try to cheer myself up with a tag. I found a good one that we can give a try to. It's the Gods of Olympus book tag, which I found on the channel of someone called Cassidy Voynich. And it's just a bunch of questions organized around the pantheon of ancient Greek mythology. Starting with Zeus, of course, number one. Name a favorite fictional leader, good or bad. And the one I had in mind today is Duke Leto from Frank Herbert's science fiction classic Dune. Not just in general either. There's one particular scene, those of you who've read the book will know the scene I mean, in which he's in an ornithopter, he's in a science fiction helicopter flying over the sands of Dune when a spice extraction factory is threatened by a giant sandworm. And it's a really good scene. It's there. Dune has 5 set piece scenes in it, and it's the first, and it's the only one really that isn't devoted to a character who lives throughout the book. Duke Leto dies early in the book, but he's alive and well in this scene, and it's a very, very good, as a couple of characters in the scene observe at the time. It's a very good demonstration of his leadership ability. A leadership ability, I might add, that his son Paul never demonstrates, even though we're supposed to take it on faith. But that's a rant for another time. Question number 2, Hera. I always stumble over these names because I learned Greek mythology with Roman names, and in my trilogy of savagely brutal Greek mythology pastiche, Troy War, Steve Donahue's Ulysses, and the Telemachiad, the Roman names are used exclusively. So, but Hera, the sister of Zeus and also his wife, the Queen of Heaven. Who are your favorite fictional parents? I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. I don't understand the association. Hera was not a good parent. But the 2 that came to mind in this particular instance are from The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. They are Father Wolf and Raksha the Demon, the 2 wolves who take in the little boy Mowgli, and who they take him in as a little baby, and they're not sure what to do with him, and very soon after they take him in, minutes after they take him in, Shere Khan the tiger sticks his enormous head through the hole of the den, demanding the boy child. He's killed the parents, or dispersed them, but he lost the child in the forest and wants it back. And his demanding the child halfway convinces Raksha the demon to keep him. He's under their protection now. It's neat. It's a neat moment. I guess I'm concentrating on moments. I don't know exactly why. Maybe that'll change. Question number 3, Demeter, the goddess of the seasons. Talk about a bad parent. But that's, again, a mythological rant for another time. What fictional food would you like to try? The first thing that came to mind was lembas bread from The Lord of the Rings. A way bread, a wayfarer's snack that is given to our travelers by the elves, that sustains it, one or 2 bites of it, one piece of it will sustain you for a long day of activity, and it tastes good. And it's always been a dream of mine to dispense with the whole falderall of food. You just get a really, really good, simple, all-purpose food, and just eat it sparingly. once or twice and have all the energy you need. I guess that's the stereotypical answer of someone who doesn't really care much about taste and who's not a cook. But lembas bread has always struck me as fascinating, unless it's addictive, who knows. Question number 4, Poseidon, the god of the sea. Name a book where water is central. One of the books that came to mind is something that is out of print and will be forever out of print. And that's a book I've mentioned on this channel once before. It's Under the City of Angels by Jerry Earl Brown, a 1981 science fiction novel in which the coast of California has sunk into the sea. And a lot of the main character is a wreck diver, and a lot of the book takes place underwater or near water. But then there's a book that is always going to be in print, and it's also a favorite of mine. It's The 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, which, if you have only heard about it, but it strikes you as this musty old classic that you've never got around to, get around to it, because it's not. There's a reason why it's still alive after all this time. It's a heck of a book. Question number 5, Dionysus. Name which character would you most like to have a party with? I couldn't answer this question. I racked my brains, but I think the problem is the disconnect between what the question considers to be a party and what I consider to be a party. I have a party here in this room about once a month, and it's plenty of wine and plenty of bad food and tons of bookish conversation, and conversation about writing and publishing and publicists and the writing world and the reviewing world. And I fill the room with people who can do that and just enjoy it. And I don't know, I guess I'm old enough now so that my idea of a party is completely personalized to me. It's not anymore a question of a gigantic doorbuster at the Kappa Sig house where everybody has those red plastic cups and one size fits all. Not sure that it ever was that, but now I have no interest in such things, and I look forward to the party that I have here every month. And I can't think of a literary character who has such a party or who would want to be here. I can think of plenty of literature characters, writers from the past that would be right at home. But I think I'm going to have to pass on the question. We'll go on to number 6, which is Apollo. A great debut, or the first book in a series you enjoyed. No idea why that's connected with Apollo. But I love the question. And the one that came to mind is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, the first book in his Dandelion Dynasty series. Big, thick fantasy novel that I read. I read the ARC of it when it was coming out, and then I reread it when it came out in the big hardcover. And I liked it. I liked it fine. But it's done one of those things that fiction always does. I talk about it all the time, complain about it sometimes. It just doesn't seem fair in a way, but I guess that's what a non-fiction reader would think. The way fiction moves around on you in the back of your mind when you're not paying attention to it. And things crop back forward that the author did that needed time to sink in on you. And that book has done that, and its sequel has also done that. The more I think about it, the more I look back on those books, the more eager I am for the third book. The more I think this might be a really groundbreakingly intelligent new fantasy series. So so the Grace of Kings and the second one I think is called The Wall of Storms would be the books that would answer this question. Number 7, Artemis. And then I have to read you the quote from the tag because it's just mystifying. Quote, of all the Greek goddesses, she was the most self-sufficient, living life on her own terms, comfortable in both solitude and holding the reins of leadership. Close quote. I don't recognize that at all. I have no idea what the original creator of this tag thinks they're talking about when they associate any of that with Artemis. I don't have any idea. Is self-sufficient, living her life on her own terms? Is that supposed to be extreme code for being a virgin? Completely comfortable in both solitude and holding the reins of leadership? When did Artemis ever lead anything? The Hunt? I don't understand the girl power figure in this question. It doesn't map onto Artemis in any piece of Greek mythology that I've ever read. But the prompt is your favorite female heroine. And I thought about this. I thought about all sorts of figures from science fiction and fantasy. Thought about all sorts of figures from 20th century fiction. I keep going back to the most hackneyed answer in the world, Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. And the reason why is because, sort of reflected in the question, she lives life on her own terms, and yet, in that pivotal scene, she has the courage to face her own behavior and decide that it was wrong. With no one around, literally no one around. She's reading a letter. She's reading and rereading a letter. No one's accusing her. Nothing could possibly go wrong if she kept acting the way she was acting before. But instead, she forces herself to think about it in new ways. Till this moment, I never knew myself. I just think that is such a heroic moment, such a heroic thing for a character to do, any character. That it just kept coming to my mind for this question. So I'm going to pick that. I'm afraid I'm going to pick Lizzie Bennet. Question number 8, Athena, a character who is wise. This is sort of like the Artemis thing. Leads me to think that maybe the creator of this tag is getting their characterization of Greek mythology from something other than Greek mythology. And of course, that would have to be true, right? I mean, how many people, even on book 2, how many people who say they love Greek mythology have ever read the original sources of Greek mythology? They don't, right? They read somebody's later retelling of Greek mythology. I know of no myth in which Athena is wise, but she has later become characterized that way with the owl on her shoulder and all that. So I'll play along. Certainly, she's not wise in my book Troy War. She's a major character in Troy War, but she's not wise. But none of my Olympians are anyway. And as far as a character who is wise, I just reread a book for the 80 millionth time. I shouldn't have reread it. I shouldn't have spared the time, but it's not long, and I love it so. And I needed comfort. And it's a book I've mentioned on this channel before. It's the Book of Merlin by T.H. White. He wrote The Once and Future King, which is made up of 4 very long chapters, 4 very long books. The Sword and the Stone, the first of them, is often published as its own standalone book, and all of the other 3 are perfectly capable of standing on their own, and yet marvelously they build into one book. And there's a 5th book. The Book of Merlin is the 5th book, and for some unknown reason, it isn't unknown. If I read the right memoirs, I will find out. I haven't actually bothered to root around and figure out what the reason is, but for some reason the publisher decided to publish the Book of Merlin separately, and I don't know why. I like it in one sense because it is so beautiful. Despite all the beauty that's in The Once and Future King, it is the most beautiful section of that story by far, and it takes place in a moment. Old King Arthur is on the battlefield. He's in his tent. He's facing, Mordred. He's facing the forces he knows he can't win against. And he's facing the ruin of his entire dream. When suddenly he's plucked out of that moment into a badger's den with his old tutor Merlin and a group of animals. A badger, a greyhound, a snake, an owl, a little hedgehog. And Merlin says their purpose is to debate the worth of mankind, to weigh in the balance the worth of humanity as a whole. This humanity that Arthur has spent his whole life fighting to ennoble. And Arthur's old and he's tired, but Merlin is a sort of a ruthless intellect, and he puts Arthur through a couple of examples of the things that are famous from The Sword and the Stone when he was a boy, when he was Wart. He puts him through animal transformations. He makes him into an ant and a goose and allows him to experience those worlds. And the second, when he becomes a goose and meets a beautiful goose, and when he comes back, when he retransforms into an old King Arthur, there in the group, and finds them still bloodlessly quarreling over this and that theoretical and philosophical issue, he becomes outraged, and so does the little hedgehog, who stands up and defends him, and invites him. He chastises the others, and then invites the king to walk out with him at night, before sunrise, in the 2 hours before sunrise, actually right about now, and see England when it's not fighting, when it's sleeping, when it's his land. And he sits on a hill with the hedgehog, and he looks out over the darkness and sees the light on in a cottage somewhere, that maybe someone's ill or someone's on an early errand, sees the sun just barely beginning to lighten the horizon, and realizes in that moment that he loves England more than Guinevere, more than Lancelot, more than anything. And he's its king. And when he comes back from that trip outside, when he comes back to the Badger's Den, he's the wisest character in any literature that I know of. It doesn't last long. It's just a page or two until the end of the book, but it's just beautiful. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Of course, I recommend The Once and Future King anyway. I think it's the greatest work of fantasy ever written. But I also recommend the Book of Merlin, and I recommend it even if you haven't read the big, book that precedes it. But that's a very long answer. Sorry, but that would be my answer right now, especially since I'm sort of in that moment now. I'm not gaining any wisdom by it, but I am now very, very familiar with those 2 hours before dawn. But anyway, here, where were we? Question number 9: is Hermes, who was the messenger of the gods, if you could travel to any fictional setting, where would you go? This is the beginning of a bit of rockiness here in this tag. There are a couple of questions later on that are also very rocky. I've dealt with this before in earlier tags about wanting to travel to fictional places. I just don't want to. I don't see the interest in it that anybody does. Maybe because fictional places just aren't as real to me as they are to real big fans of fiction. I look at a fictional place like Anthony Trollope's Barchester or Rivendell or something like that, and all I can see is what's missing. All I can see is this is a creation of someone who didn't make it a three-dimensional place. It's a location in a book. It's meant to serve a plot purpose. It's not meant to be a place. How do you know what it's like to live there? You don't. So I guess I think I'm missing a key imagination element to answer questions like this. So I'm going to pass. Question number 10 is Hephaestus, who was the blacksmith of the gods. If you could have any fictional tool made, what would it be? Now, I know this question wants me to name a tool that already exists in fiction, but it doesn't specify that, and I actually have a tool in mind that doesn't exist in fiction, and I want it to exist in real life. I have called it the Flexicom, but I don't care what it's called as long as it does what I want, and I know what I want it to be. I want it to be the size of a bank card when it's at rest. But it's semi-solid, and you can move it into any shape you want. So you can make it a slate for an iPad. You can make it a wall hanging for a plasma TV screen. You can make it hand-sized for a phone. And it's powered by light. And I don't mean just solar power. I mean it draws power from the whole spectrum of light. So, infrared light, it is constantly charged. In other words, charging is no longer even an issue. No one, even when they have a Flexicom, no one even thinks about whether or not it has power. Of course it has power. If it exists in the world, it is in the electromagnetic field of Earth, then it has power. Power is not an issue anymore. No one makes money off it. No one profiteers off it. No one threatens to take it away from you if you don't pay a certain amount of money. It just exists. The thing just exists, powered. And also, it's constantly connected to... I don't want it to have Wi-Fi. I want it to have the next thing, whatever the next thing is after Wi-Fi, better than Wi-Fi, where so that your flexicon is always a thing. It's always there, and it's anything you want it to be. You can pull it to whatever shape you want, and then pull it back to whatever shape you want. Virtually weightless, and always connected and always powered. That's what I want. That's the tool that doesn't exist yet. Let's see here. Question number 11. Aries. What is your favorite fictional battle? Now, one of these is something I've mentioned on this channel before. It's from Brandon Sanderson's. The final book in Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series was written by Brandon Sanderson, and it concludes the whole story with the Tarmon-Gai'don, which is the gigantic battle that has been prophesied in all of the books leading up to this book. And instead of doing it off screen or leaving it in the future, Brandon Sanderson decides to write it, and he writes the hell out of it. It's 200 pages long, and it's amazingly good. Just a breathless stretch of writing. Just love it. And in addition to that, there's also another thing that I mentioned on this channel before, but it's not written. It's in a movie. It's the Battle of Pelennor Fields from Peter Jackson's movie version of The Return of the King, and it's amazing. Well, I'm sure you all know it, right? That is not a movie that BookTube is not going to know about. I can go on and on about The Lion in Winter or A Man for All Seasons. Not all of you will have seen it, but the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies, I'm assuming you've all seen them. So you probably all agree with me. What a thing. Question number 12. Aphrodite. What is your ultimate ship? Didn't know if I could give a patented Steve glare so early in the morning, but it turns out I can. And question number 13. Not much better. Hades. If you could petition Hades, the god of the underworld, to bring any fictional character back from the dead, who would it be? I'm not going to glare at this, but I am still going to disdain the question. This is a bit of a problem. It's a problem on BookTube. I suspect a problem with a lot of readers, just in general. If a character in a fictional work dies, it suits the needs of the fictional work. The author hasn't killed a real person. If you, I want to say this as non-confrontationally as possible, if you look back at a novel that you have read and feel a pang of anguish at the death of a character, then the author has done their job. If you look back at a novel that you have read and you wish that a certain character hadn't died, you're doing it wrong. Because novels aren't real life. Everything that happens in a novel happens for a reason that has to do with the novel. I guess what I'm saying for this question, which fictional character would you want back from the dead, is that I reject the premise. I will not subscribe to the premise. You shouldn't want that. One, feeling anguish that a character you like has died is one thing. Wanting them back as if it were real life is another. And that's unfortunately the Hades question asked the wrong question. So, and then number 14, if you could be the god of anything, what would it be? Oh, I don't know. Maybe dogs. And then you, what's left is to tag people. All of you are sound asleep now, but I have my usual suspects for tagging. Sue at Sue's Book Nook. I'd love to hear what you say to this. Jeremy at Jer Sings and Reads. That would be great. Olive, of course, the goddess of St. Petersburg. Britta, Caleb, Luke Lane Reads, who I assume would be the god of natural light. And Erin at the Reading Squid, who I watched a video of hers the other day where she's petting a cat the whole time like a James Bond villain, and I was still amazed to see that she doesn't even have, I think, 50 subscribers yet. Why? That's crazy. So I definitely tag her, please, if you have the time. And that is it. That is the Gods of Olympus book tag, and it did cheer me up. But I'm getting signals here that I was right. We are going to have to go back outside. So I'll stop this for now, and I'll see you later. Thank you, BookTube.